First, jobs. At a grocery store, a camp, maybe a restaurant. Whatever the job is, it comes with something beautiful, a paycheck. For many first-time earners, though, the shining moment of receiving that first paycheck is quickly tarnished by an unpleasant realization. Their total pay is a lot lower than they expected. Imagine you received a paycheck for a lower amount than you expected. What would you do? Before storming in to talk to the boss or figuring out how to report stolen wages, the first thing a person could do is take a closer look at the numbers on their pay stub. With every paycheck comes a pay stub, a document that provides details about a worker's earnings, including two important amounts: the amount the worker has earned and the amount the worker gets to keep. The difference between the total amount earned and the amount a worker gets to keep is the difference between gross pay and net pay. In this lesson, we'll explore these terms and find out where that difference ends up. Let's check it out. Gross pay is the total amount a person earns by working. It's not gross as in disgusting. It comes from the same word as great, meaning big or large. With most first-time jobs, gross pay is based on how much a worker earns per hour, or their wage, and the number of hours they work. It's a simple multiplication problem. If a person earns $18 an hour and works 10 hours a week, their gross pay will be 18 times 10, or $180 per week. If a person works 20 hours at a wage of $15 per hour, how much is their gross pay? $15 per hour times 20 hours is a gross pay of $300. But they don't get to keep all of the money they've earned. That's because a portion of that gross pay amount is subtracted before it reaches them. The amount left over is known as net pay. This is sometimes called take-home pay because it's the part of a worker's earnings that they get to keep or take home. Which amount is larger, gross pay or net pay? Gross pay is always larger than net pay because net pay is what's left after money has been subtracted from gross pay. That's always the case, no matter what job a person has. At first, it might seem kind of unfair that a person doesn't get to keep all the money they earn. They might wonder, where does that money go? The money goes to deductions. A deduction is just a fancy way of saying money subtracted from a person's gross pay. There are two kinds of deductions: voluntary and involuntary. Involuntary deductions are deductions a worker doesn't choose, like paying taxes to the federal or state government. Almost all people employed in the United States have federal taxes deducted from their earnings. In fact, at most jobs, employees are required to sign paperwork on their first day of work acknowledging that they agree to pay taxes, or else they won't be able to take the job. In almost all cases, to work and not pay taxes is against the law. True or false? Involuntary deductions from a person's gross pay go to their employer. False. Involuntary deductions go to the government, not to a person's employer. But even though that money is paid to the government, it isn't exactly gone. Involuntary deductions pay for many public goods and services, helping to ensure that everyone can check out books from the public library, visit parks or outdoor spaces, and use public streets and sidewalks, among other things. Some involuntary deductions fund government programs like Social Security and Medicare, which pool money to provide care for those who need it, such as retirees, children, and people with disabilities. Workers whose money goes to fund these programs today can reasonably expect to benefit from these programs later in life. And depending on a variety of factors, a person may get some of their deductions back in the form of a refund after they file their taxes. Voluntary deductions are deductions a worker chooses or volunteers to take out of their paycheck. There are many different kinds of voluntary deductions, such as paying for health insurance or life insurance, or putting money into retirement savings accounts. Because voluntary deductions are unique to each employee, that means employees' net pay can be different even if their gross pay is the same. Let's take a look at an example pay stub to see gross and net pay in practice. This pay stub shows one pay period, which in this case is 1 week of pay. This column on the far right shows the total amounts for the year up to the current date. YTD means year to date. But let's look at this column, showing the earnings and deductions for the current pay period. According to the pay stub, what are the gross and net pay amounts for the current pay period? The gross pay, or as it's listed here, gross wages, is $630.90, and the net, or take-home pay, is $519.73. How much money was deducted from this worker's pay during the current pay period? The total deductions are listed as $111.17. We would get the same number by subtracting gross pay minus net pay, or adding up all of the individual deductions. Which of the following have been deducted? Federal and state income taxes and Medicare have been deducted, but not Social Security. This may be an error. Generally speaking, at least some money will always be withheld for involuntary deductions like Social Security. If money isn't withheld, it could mean a mistake has been made that could lead to penalties, fees, or a high tax bill. Mistakes like these are rare, but whenever you start earning a regular paycheck, it's still smart to always double-check your gross pay, net pay, and deductions for each pay period. Tracking this information over time can help ensure that you're getting paid the right amount and that the right deductions are being taken from your paycheck. You don't want any surprises when you file your taxes for that calendar year or when you set a budget. When you create a budget, should it be based on your gross pay or net pay? When budgeting, be sure to base it on your net and not gross pay. Otherwise, you're likely to end up with far less money than you expected. Now that you have the basics, what questions do you still have about gross and net pay? When it comes to gross and net pay, there's always more to learn. Thanks for joining us to make the world of money make more sense.